Yeah. So, well, I guess like many guitar players, I actually taught myself. So I was studying, by myself until I was about 18. And I guess I was playing a lot of the same music guitar players play when they teach themselves. I was playing some rock, some blues, classic rock bands like, Guns N' Roses, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and some B.B. King, Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, that kind of stuff. And then really, I guess when I was starting to get to 17 or 18, I was finding I was maybe a little, maybe a little bored of just playing the same scale over and over again. And I had I wanted to investigate more. And there was a fantastic guitarist who lived where my parents are from, in Bath, called Guy Harrop, and he's he's sadly passed away now, but was a wonderful jazz guitarist. And so he was really into George Benson. So George Benson was one of my first kind of early influences, and he was my first teacher. He helped me prepare some pieces and some studies to audition for music college. And and then I went to study when I was 19 at a place in Cardiff called the Royal Welsh College of Music. And there I studied with Dave Cliff, a fantastic guitarist, Richard Jones, Mike Outram, and then I took some lessons in New York as well with Gilad Hexelman and Lage Lund. And so that was my education really. I was really doing it myself until I was about 18, and then I kind of realized I needed some help and some lessons and some expertise, so I started studying then. It's, classical guitar is something I became interested in, after a few years of studying. Really, I was just studying jazz, and of course I took lessons with people who weren't just guitarists, which are one of my, I think, important influences is a great saxophonist, Jeff Simpkins, who's based in the UK, and I play with him sometimes, wonderful musician. But I was really just studying jazz and kind of getting used to, I felt like I had so much stuff to learn, there's so much, but, learning about improvising, learning song, learning jazz standards, there's lots of stuff to learn. So I was really just focusing totally on jazz for the first few years, and then the classical, maybe that influence came a bit later, actually, for me. Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. I need to remember the answer. I think for me, with the book, the idea was, at the beginning, I didn't think I was going to write a book at all. I noticed that I was learning some pieces. A lot of the time, it was actually classical piano pieces, and I was trying to investigate, I guess, how to express myself on the guitar, maybe in a more advanced way. So I was thinking about control of the instrument, dynamics, different colors I could get on the guitar, and so I started writing just a few pieces, which I was trying to work on my technique with that, So I remember writing the first piece, and it was all about, it was actually inspired by a couple of pieces by Debussy and Schubert. It was all about trying to play a melody and then the accompaniment much more quietly, So it was about doing two things at once. And then, I just, for me, it was helpful to kind of write some pieces to kind of practice these things. It was more about that, So I was just trying to come up with little songs to kind of help work on my technique and kind of my control of the instrument. And then over a period of time, I realized, I'm writing quite a few of these pieces, and so it'd be nice to put it together in a book. And then, then kind of working out how that connected with, myself as a jazz musician. And so, a lot of it was just, if I'm going to play, if I'm playing like a ballad, for example, how am I going to try and bring that piece to life? Which things about like playing the guitar, like with the control of my instrument, can help me kind of perform better, So that's an example of, if I'm playing a ballad, like I play the melody and try and make the melody sound like it's someone singing it, and then try and have an accompaniment underneath, like softer, So that was really the idea with the book. At first I wasn't going to do any book, and actually it was quite a few guitarists wrote to me saying, "Hey, we'd love to buy these pieces. Can we buy the sheet music?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." I would just play them and then post them on YouTube or something, and people were writing to me saying, "Hey, can we get the sheet music?" So I started writing the sheet music together, and then it was just during COVID. I had so much time, so I put all the pieces together and then some technical exercises, and then I sent it to Faber, the publisher, and I was really a bit surprised, but they were happy to publish it. And so, and I guess the title Etudes is just, it's the idea of short pieces like studies, but they're songs, so they're things, they have the kind of study element, but at the heart of it, they're still songs you can, play, so. It's been a few years since I did it, honestly, and I started working on those pieces kind of 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, I think that was how it begun, really. Yeah, okay, that's a great question, and it's actually really it's a hard question to answer in a way. I think it partly depends on the context, you know. So for me, when I feel like I'm improvising and it's going well, I really know the music. I know the music. So, for example, if we're playing a jazz standard I know really well, or one of my own pieces, then for me, once I know the song really well, like I have it really kind of deep inside me, my brain, and it's there. I'm trying not to think at all. And so when things go well, I'm not thinking. And then the minute I start to think, things go worse, So I think you have to, it's difficult to explain in a way, but for me, you have to know the material, the kind of language, the vocabulary, and the song you're playing so well that it can just almost happen without thinking. So it's I definitely feel like the relationship between the melody and harmony, how melody connects in jazz, for example, often you're dealing with different chords, and so the thing that's interesting to me is how you can improvise melodies which connect and weave through the chords, but certainly I'm trying not to think very much, trying to kind of let it happen or like naturally. But in order for that to happen, you have to make sure you know the material really well. And then I guess if I'm trying to improvise on something I don't know so well, then there's sometimes more thought. I'm looking at a score and I'm just trying to use my experience. Okay, how do I know how to connect this chord to this chord? And this, really just generally trying to think with melody and how melody connects the chords together, For me, it's, I'm improvising normally. I'm improvising with language and ideas that I understand, So the improvising is the spontaneity of what I do with those ideas at the moment. So just like now, this answer to your question is I'm improvising really but I'm going to improvise in English, because that's the language I'm comfortable speaking in. If I speak a tiny bit of French, but it's terrible. So if I try to give you this answer in French, it would be much worse, So it's about improvising with the things you understand. And for me, it's about how that in a moment of performance, how that comes together. So, away from the performance, there's a lot of study, like there may be, and this is something I'm doing almost every day, is ideas I like, vocabulary and language I like, and I want to develop. That's what I practice, so I'll practice that. And then I hope when I do a performance, it will happen automatically. And so, yeah, it's a great question. And it's in a way, it's the easiest and also most difficult question to answer is what is it to improvise, But for me, it's about, improvising with the materials you understand, and the language you understand. Yeah, I mean, so I had a Gibson, like a 175 for a long time, actually 165, and I was doing a gig this is when I was still a student, I was doing a gig and someone knocked it over and the neck snapped off. So I had to make a decision. I was like, I need to buy a new guitar. And so I was like, well, I was, at this point, I was taking music pretty seriously, practicing guitar every day, and I felt like I wanted to be a guitarist, musician. And so I was just investigating different types of guitars, and there was a few different brands, like luthier brands, that I remember different friends of mine had. And there was a guy in London, he's a guy called David who runs the London Jazz Guitar Society, and he had a Moffa guitar. I said, oh, David, can I just try your guitar? And so I went around his place and I tried the guitar, and I was like, oh, wow, this is really great. This is like a different level to the guitar I had before. I really liked that guitar, the Gibson 165, but, it was laminate wood. It wasn't like, it wasn't such a kind of well-crafted instrument like David's Moffa was. And there was a few other companies, I tried their guitars, and I was like, I really like this, like particularly this Moffa guitar really stood out to me. And so I wrote to Nico, who makes the guitars, and he had an old guitar for sale. And he sent me some information about it. It was very similar to the one David had in London. So I just said, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. And so I went to Italy, I tried it out, I loved it and I bought it. And then that was really my only guitar for 10 years. It's the only guitar I had for 10 years. And I loved it. I still love it so much. You know, I still practice on that guitar probably more than this other one, this new one. And then really with the new guitar, I spoke to Nico and I said, you know, I love my other guitar. It's perfect, but maybe there's some scenarios where something different would be helpful. So especially if I'm playing with piano, the kind of dynamic balance between the two instruments. My other guitar is totally hollow, you know, so sometimes at very loud volumes it can be difficult. And then with a guitar like this, it has a block inside. The sound is a bit more direct. So he made me this, and it's, yeah, fantastic. So I just felt like these instruments are higher quality, you know, and also not necessarily more expensive than buying like a Gibson. Often those guitars can be really expensive as well. You know, you're paying for the brand, and they can be wonderful guitars. But for me, this seemed like a better deal, you know. So yeah, that's the story.